Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to another episode of the Always Be Testing podcast. I'm your host, DeGrange, and I'm super excited to talk to Amber Osborne today. What's up, Amber?
Hi, Ty.
Nice to see you.
Yeah, nice to see you too. It's
Yeah,
been a while.
it's been a minute. Back in the old days of Seattle, I think it was at a UX conference or a
Yeah,
Seattle
Seattle
Interactive, maybe
Interactive. Yeah, that's it.
2018, maybe.
Yeah, I remember you bought me a
Guessing.
coffee.
There you go. There you go. Amazing. In the capital, in the coffee capital of the US, maybe.
In the coffee capital of the US, but I believe it was conference coffee. So,
Hmm.
maybe not the
Yeah.
best quality coffee, but it
Yeah.
still got me caffeinated.
Yeah.
It
It
made
might
that connection happen.
made the connection happen. Maybe didn't technically buy you one. It might have been on the conference. So, being honest.
Oh, the
That's good.
secrets come out.
I'm just thinking in hindsight. I want to be honest with the audience and you,
That's
but
That's good.
I'll take the win. I'll take the win. So good to see you. It's warm in Seattle. It's warm in your area. What's going on?
I You tell me. It is very warm here. It was about 100 degrees yesterday. I'll get into this more in the podcast, but I'm originally from Florida, so people are like, "You should be used to this." I'm like, "We have air conditioning in Florida. Seattle has older buildings, so not a lot of AC going around, and it is hot. It is hot." And I'm wearing
Yeah,
long sleeves because that's what I do.
it's the music. It's a little punk rock of you. I think I'd
Yeah,
throw it out
yeah.
there.
Yeah, it's punk rock to be sweaty. Yes.
I love it. I love it. Well, I'm super excited to jump into all things Amber. Amber Osborne has an amazing background. She's doing some really interesting things in consulting. She's done some very impressive things with a variety of clients in marketing, in the emerging tech world, in the music world. And so it's going to be a fun conversation for everybody. And we're grateful to have her on today. Um, Maybe kick us off. Like, how did you get into the fun filled world of marketing?
How did I get into the fun-filled world of marketing? I think I got into probably the most fun-filled world of marketing, which was in music. So how I first got into marketing, it was, just stapling band flyers to telephone poles when I was in high school and sneaking into venues that I was not old enough to be in, essentially to work merch booths for folks that I knew that had bands. Uh, I started off doing a lot of event promotions and marketing for local bands outside of Tampa, Florida, which grew into working with various artists and labels. Um, Essentially, if a band was coming through Tampa or Orlando playing a lot of the larger venues, I would get assignments to go out and do promotional work. A vast majority of that consisted of a lot of very unglamorous work in Florida heat, essentially. I mostly just like lived at Kinko's, printing flyers, doing a lot of the promotional material distribution to stores, just running around everywhere, running around backstage, making sure that artists had their Sharpie markers for like their meet and greets. And I usually always had a silver Sharpie marker on me at all times, just in
Love
case.
it.
I kind of still do. I still keep a Sharpie in my purse just in case. I don't know. I guess it's just habit over the years. But
That's
I
cool.
it's just it was quite an experience. A lot of people are like, oh, that sounds a lot like the movie Almost Famous, and I was like, yeah, it kind of was. I was pretty young, and I just I learned a lot of things about life, about people during this time, about marketing. How artists market themselves. They create those personas and those visual identities. Either with themselves or their art their performances, how much storytelling is important. So creating that allure and mythology and that lore. Also, I learned quite a bit about the industry, and the other side of things, how the industry market artists and how much of a business it truly is, the good and the bad. It was a bit of pretty big experience to have in my teenage formative years. Going into college, and then my more formal core marketing experience is mostly in around product marketing and technology. I've
That's
been this.
amazing.
It's been a lot of things. I've marketed even sweet potatoes at one time. So multiple industries: tech, music, gaming, and sweet potatoes.
That'll be the title of the podcast, I think.
It would be a whole other podcast. It's a whole other lifetime, whole other podcast there just around the sweet potatoes.
Okay. Part two will be sweet potatoes. Got it.
No.
What are there any bands that we might know of that you were involved in terms of the marketing in the early days?
Yeah. So again, it was a lot of bands that would come through Tampa. So it was a lot of bigger artists. So I got to see and just meet and work with a lot of really great people, either the artists or their management or their production folks. So Pearl Jam, Stone Temple Pilots, Velvet Revolver, Queens of the Stone Age. It was early 2000s, so like a lot of the pop punk bands that were out then. Worked quite a few very very hot Vans Warped Tours. Um, just
Amazing.
I got to see a lot of artists also that were just starting off that became bigger. So that was really like wow, like I kind of maybe helped them out a little bit with like promoting those albums and those shows. So
You were
yeah,
part of it.
it's just cool. It's cool to be a part of the big machine, I would say.
Absolutely. Absolutely. In some cases, some of the smaller machines, perhaps too. That's
Yeah, and that's what I'm doing now. Little smaller machines.
that's awesome. That's awesome. Still promoting some artists and doing some consulting.
Yeah, so I'm still doing consulting and music. Very light touch, but I do work with some local bands. Walking Papers is one of them out of Seattle. And yeah, I really love connecting artists with kind of more the marketing side of things, because a lot of them either have had labels before and are now going independent. So it's just like, okay, what do I do now? And
Yeah.
it's a lot. It's really a
Yeah.
lot.
It sounds like you can bring a wealth of experience to help them out. When you what kind of kept you coming back into the marketing world, even beyond music? What were some of those things that you found that you were good at or you really enjoyed with it? What kind of made it stick for you and made you realize like this marketing thing made sense for you?
I think the really the point that made everything click for me is, I really love helping people build that yellow brick road to success, whether it be a product or a business. I really love laying the foundations for people to connect with what they love on the consumer side of things. I love helping the businesses connect with their communities or build their communities. Just making those dots be connected is just it is a kind of a turning point for me when someone comes to me and is like, hey, like I really love your product, or I love the band that you're working with, like here's my story and how much it's changed my life. Or hey, your product helped me connect with a community of people. Now I'm really active and I'm doing this, and this. And I'm just like, oh my God, that's so fantastic. I've had people at previous companies, customers, they would send us like like thank you notes. And one time we got like a lucite plaque actually with a poem on it. It was really beautiful of like how much the product helped them in their life. And yeah,
That's
it's just
awesome.
it's I just love connecting people. I'm a connector. I like
I
making
love
magic
that.
magic happen.
There you go. And that's what you do, right? It's like, it just kind of, you can kind of get a sense of it when you speak to certain people and they have a passion to, you see it. It shows and it comes out, which is fantastic. When you had the music experience, you're still involved. That's fantastic. I'm sure that informed a lot of things. When you think about like tech and startups and emerging tech, like how did that come about?
I've always been an entrepreneurial spirit. I love that word. I always feel like I'm going to mess it up. Entrepreneurial. Um, but I've always definitely been kind of a misfit. Someone says no, you can't do that, so I go and do it. I co-founded a social media agency in Tampa back in the day, and went from Tampa to Seattle via a conversation that happened over Twitter DMs with my former business partner, Eli. He lived in Seattle and I lived in Florida. And he's like, hey, I'm working on this machine learning startup that has to do with social media. I need somebody who knows a little bit more about marketing and social media, be a subject matter expert, and really help us build this business and do business development. And I just went, I never thought about living in Seattle, but I like the music and I like coffee, so let's talk. So 13, 14 years later, I'm still here. So I guess I liked it.
Yep, yep. I love
uh,
it. I
you
love
know,
it.
it's a continuous adventure because like I always come back to the startup world. I've been an advisor for multiple companies or a board member, CMO of a few multiple startups over time. And it's all really taught me a lot of lessons about business and marketing and people. And that's why I have gray hair now, I believe.
You and me both. I think I have quite a
uh,
bit more. It definitely, the misfit thing is interesting because I feel like that's definitely aligned with the entrepreneurial thing, which is aligned with the startup thing. And I've been involved myself quite a lot as an entrepreneur now, but then also previously at a lot of startups, in a lot of startups, and then helping a lot of startups when we were evolving and building the business. Still working with startups myself, so I can absolutely very much identify with where you're coming from there. And it sounds like there's been a ton of learnings. In my observation, the learnings at startups are just like compounded because everything's kind of on steroids, for lack of a better term, right? The stakes are
Absolutely.
higher, perhaps there's speed.
Yeah. And
What are your thoughts there?
I think as a marketer, sometimes when you're at a company, you kind of get siloed. Like you're the marketer, you only talk to marketing, or you only work on marketing things. What's really amazing about startups, and it really just on an education level, is that you work with all different types of departments, and it's very it's very cross silos, I would say. So I've worked a lot with engineering, worked a lot with design and executive level and business development and just everybody, you know? And I've learned, I'm not a technical person, but I've learned a lot about kind of the technical side of things and how it plays into marketing, and that engineering and that CTOs should work with the CMOs, and that we should communicate and talk about uh, customer feedback and like how things work and how things might change the marketing strategy. um, and I get so jazzed when I get to work with other departments because I'm just like, oh, what are you doing over here? Like, and how
Totally.
how can that help me on the marketing side of things, or how can what I've learned from
Yeah.
marketing the product help you?
Yeah.
So it's
But
exciting.
heck yeah, I think that spirit of like community and connecting people and like empathy and like thinking about the challenges of a product person or an engineer. And like, I think those are some of the more highlights. I also, it resonates with me a ton because I got to be in the trenches and I
Yeah.
love talking to the developers and nerding out and being really being close to the technology. It just it's kind of what the heartbeat of most startups in this era and will continue to be. And so it's cool to hear that you kind of really tapped into that and collaborated closely with people on that.
Always. And if somebody tries to force me to just kind of stay in my silo, like I secretly sneak out and, and start talking to like the developers or the community just to find out what's going on, and how can I help, how can we help each other.
Yeah. And I think the best marketers, performance marketers, growth people, however you want to define them, or they're really, I think they share that mindset. Certainly has to be focused and prioritized, but especially at a startup, you're really absorbing everything from a lot of different teams, especially technically or product based.
Yeah, you're wearing a lot of hats, and I think if everybody can help each other wear each other's hats, as much as
Yeah,
possible, like seriously, like
yeah,
everybody in a startup can help out, should
yeah,
help out where they excel, and where they can.
yeah,
You know,
yeah. Were there, that's a big learning and takeaway from the startup experience. Were there other maybe like learnings or aha moments or from your perspective about this your startup experience in the past or perhaps now?
yeah, absolutely. I think everybody when they get into a startup, they see the dollar signs and they see the big exits, and while big exits are always super nice, right? You never really let it consume you too much if things end. I've never considered things to be a failure because, again, like what we just spoke about, is that you learn a lot. You learn a lot, and you take those lessons with you, and also, what you worked on, even if it was for a short amount of time, you put these sparks out into the world, you know, either through your product or through your customers or the people that you have worked with. And also, what I mean by that is like your efforts may have connected people or made their lives better, even if, your company's life was not as long as you wanted it to be. If you make a difference in one
Yeah,
person's life or made an impact, you also
yeah,
got to think about how you may have paved the way for other companies as well. And you still succeed. And in that way, never think something's a failure because you didn't you didn't make it.
yeah. I love that. I think something could be a commercial failure by definition, but you could still have had a great experience, helped a bunch of people, bring value to the world, inspired other people. What a great call out. I think that's awesome. That's awesome. You you've had, you've dealt with emerging tech, you've dealt with a lot of different verticals. AR, VR, you've been able to have some experience in. Obviously, that world has a lot of, I think, hot takes from folks.
Yeah,
And I,
a lot.
what's your perspective on that industry of AR, VR, and what do you
Yeah,
think people get wrong about it?
Yeah, so I like what you said about hot takes, especially about the AR VR industry, because it seems like everybody has an opinion. And some of those are opinions that it's expensive, it's just a fad, there's really no good use for it. It's just the list goes on. Um, I've worked in it long enough to kind of see enough changes, even in the last 10 years or so. That it's like, okay, like some things didn't work out, but some things really did work. I use a workout app in virtual reality called Supernatural. And I've been using it since like 2020, and it's incredibly
Wow.
useful. It's so much fun, and then you
Wow.
realize like you just spent 30 minutes and you burnt 500 calories having a blast. So you basically like swing these bats around to hit these targets, and it's set to music, and they have an amazing music licensing, so you can just rock out to your favorite bands while working out, and like you see these beautiful, beautiful uh, landscapes that they have from all over the world. So like you're rocking out in Turkey, like you're rocking, like you get to do all of these amazing exercises in just uh, these beautiful
Love that.
worlds. So
Love that.
it's you know, the community, even in Supernatural, I just love to hear the stories of how, you know, these folks who never wanted to work out before and like just haven't been able to stick to working out, and they just put on their headset, and it's transformed a
That's
lot of,
amazing.
it's been life changing for a lot of folks. So if anybody ever
Yeah.
comes at me saying like, "Oh, VR is useless," like it's just, you know, it's just, and I'm like, it's really, you have to find what works for you.
Yeah.
Um, you
Yeah.
ha- with anything, you have to find what works for you. And if VR isn't for you, then leave it for someone else. You know,
Exactly. Yeah. And it's obviously going to improve with time. There's so many specific use cases. It's obviously had a
there
lot of positive impact.
there absolutely is. I mean, there are so many. There are so many use cases. A lot of the products that I worked in VR were virtual spaces. So, you know, places that you could go in and have interactive social, like you'd have avatars, you go in and meet people, kind of like VR chat. Um, and, you know, for brands and marketers, like everybody jumped on, you know, hey, how can we have these immersive experiences in VR? And it seems like everybody was just throwing a bunch of money into this, right? And then they're like, why isn't this working for us? Or like, and I'm just like, because you're building these grand experiences, and the consumers are still like, hey, this might be our first time in VR, like make it easy for us, make it easy for us to move around in the environment, make it not so technically top heavy where it crashes on us. um, so you know, there are just so many great uh, ways to use VR, but I think a lot of people try to jump on the trends, and they really go all full force, and then the consumers are like, hey, wait, we're still new to this. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of great use. I mean, we had a band during the pandemic, because during the pandemic, a lot of folks came out with albums and they weren't able to tour, they weren't able to promote their material like they used to. So a band named Saint Motel came to us when I was over at Mozilla, working on Mozilla Hubs, and they're like, "Hey, we want to build this interactive, immersive experience in Hubs where we're going to build. It's going to be like our album cover of this motel, like the circular motel, and each motel room had like a different theme for like a song on the album." And we're like, this is really cool. And they did it right. So when you entered the space as a fan, it was easy to navigate. They made it, you know, graphically, it was still graphically beautiful, but it wasn't too overwhelming, and it didn't like crash people's devices and stuff. But it was one of those things where I was just like, okay, like this is awesome. Like this is how to do it.
It's
So
amazing.
there's
Yeah.
there's a lot of use for it. I think people are just still trying to figure out um, the best way to use it.
Yeah. That's amazing. That makes sense. You've had obviously the theme of the pod always be testing. You've run experiments. You've had various marketing campaigns deployed, product learnings. Talking to the technology and and the engineering team, what are some of those like key learnings or maybe experiment learnings or marketing or performance learnings that have kind of stuck with you or you might recall or that you've maybe seen recently that are notable that you want to share with the audience?
Yeah, so a lot of people are just very eager, of course, to show the world what they've created. But user testing, no matter if you are a product or a band releasing an album, have that MVP, do that listening party, is so key in those beginning stages. Um, a lot of people just are like, "Hey, let's just put it out there," and I'm like, "No, no, no. You need to get your feedback. You need to start growing your community. You need to start listening to the community. Really." Uh, fostering fostering the product, fostering your community, throw things out that aren't working, create new things. This is when you want to do it. And a lot of people just will just throw out whatever and just, like, oh, we just want to get it to market. Um, and sometimes it's just like, okay, let's see how this goes. But
Yeah, yeah,
and again, over the lifetime of the product, you should always be testing, of course. Um, but in those beginning stages, like user testing is so important, um, for
yeah,
many different reasons.
yeah. And I think like you bring such a core thing, right? Like being close to the customer, staying close to the customer, asking the right questions, thinking about usability, thinking about just putting yourself in their shoes in a way that's somewhat measured and objective is just so valuable across all the things, no matter what you're marketing or selling. I think it's really cool to hear you validate that and kind of share that from your perspective because it's such a unique one.
Yeah, being people first. Product can come second.
Yeah, 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 exactly. The product's not serving an individual and addressing the people's needs, then it's not really going to make it right. Awesome. What we've talked a little bit about kind of the world of affiliate marketing and influencer marketing and kind of create this rise of the creator that we're
Yeah.
starting to see from great kind of market forces are really coming up a lot and talking about it. Obviously, it's a big focus for me and our team, but you've had some exposure to that, and you talk about it a little bit with community earlier in the pod. What are you kind of seeing in that world, as it relates to music and other verticals that you're closer to?
Yeah, so I always go more in influence marketing and towards the more independent folks. So micro influencers, um, people with 500 followers sometimes could be a heck of a lot more powerful than someone with 1 million followers. Sometimes also they're easy to work with. You have a following too that is very engaged. It can be that way with someone who's a micro influencer. I have a lot of companies or folks that I'm advising that are like, hey, we don't really have a lot of budget, and we have a very kind of uh, a product that is only a certain community would really understand anyway. So I'm like, okay, let's go into the community and find those folks that already have communities maybe under them, and they're just like, oh yeah, actually we know some folks, and I'm like, there you go. there's your
Yes.
there's your micro influencers, like those
Yep.
people that that are already really active in the community and maybe have somewhat of a following. um, Back in the day, I would have loved it if bigger companies, came to me as a micro influencer, you know, um,
Yeah.
and these are the people that are going to be ride or die for you, and they have people that are ride and die for them. I
Yep.
There's this image that I always like to like show people of what a stage with 500 engaged people in the audience looks like. It's pretty powerful because you're like, wow, that is a lot of people, you know.
Yeah.
Um, and
Absolutely.
if you get all of those people signed on, so I guess this really applies either to marketing a product or a music artist, that their value should never be how many followers they have. It should be how many people truly value them.
Yeah, I love that. It's a great line to kind of succinctly describe it, and you see it in a lot of cases. You see
Absolutely.
the importance of engagement. You see the importance of quality. You see the emphasis on authenticity. You see, okay, how much revenue are they driving? All of these things kind of point to that in different ways. Tim Ferriss has hit that drum so many times with this whole 1,000 fan thing, and I think that as you're building something new, it's like, how do I get to that first just 500 or 1,000 fans? It's really spot on. I think it kind of then you have something, especially if it's on the consumer, you know, side. It's smaller. It's really tangible. We're seeing it a lot too. I mean, a lot of we were in a pitch recently where it was like a very quite large brand, very influencer focused, and the most exciting, interesting conversations we were having were around micro influencers to be really positioned as, you know, this is real. This isn't some huge big production with a
Right. This
professional. This is the person next door saying like, "Hey, I really actually dig this."
Yeah, I like what you just said about it being a production, because sometimes when you do work with the bigger influencers, it is a production. You've got managers, you've got people. It's just like working with a bigger artist. You have a lot of different cooks in the kitchen. And it
Absolutely.
can be a longer process too to get this contract signed, and it's just I've really have also found that you have longer relationships with micro influencers than you generally get with the larger
Yeah.
influencers. So it's always a win-win for everyone. when you,
Yeah.
I really feel that way. Is that it's like y'all got to start somewhere, and you might as well start with the people that love you.
Yeah. Those diehard fans, and I think anything we can do to be long term is oftentimes our objective, and it's that's the aim, right? And I think thinking that way and trying to find partners that feed that for your business is huge. So I love
Yeah.
your call out that they can be more longer term sustainable. That's awesome. Are we doing sliding doors or are we going to
Hmm.
pass?
I think we'll pass on the sliding doors because I've
Let's
had
let's
so many moments that I'm just like, it's so hard for me to pick just one that's really
yeah.
impactful.
Well,
We
it's a
can
good
talk.
answer.
We can talk a little bit more about, I guess, um, the music, and kind of like maybe what I'm doing now.
Yeah, maybe like the almost like the return to the roots of music and all
Yeah.
that excitement around what you're doing now. Like, yeah, drop some knowledge on us about that.
Yeah, so I've kind of always had a foot in the music industry somehow, um, even through working with companies. Some of our clients have been in the music space, especially around immersive technology. Musicians, and a lot of musicians are always like, "What's new? What's new out there that we can either connect with our fans, or have them connect with us, or get our music out there." A lot of it's around music discovery in those types of products. So, what I'm doing right now is really exciting because I'm helping advise a company called Incantio, and they work in sync licensing. So sync licensing is how you get placed in movies, TV shows, video games as an artist. So that's how you get your music there, is through sync licensing and through sync licensing placements. So Encanto is a music marketplace that is two-sided. So you have artists putting their music into the music marketplace so that they can be discovered by music supervisors that need music for a project, or content creators like YouTubers that are looking for a certain kind of sound for their project. Or yeah, a good example more recently is that there's also a lot of artists that have catalogs from back in the day that need to be rediscovered, or they want to get their music back out there. They might have been really big back in the 60s in Albuquerque, but they have music that needs to be rediscovered. And
It's amazing.
like with the whole Stranger Things phenomenon, where we got reintroduced to Kate Bush and Metallica, and a whole new generation is now listening to their music. So it's really exciting because it helps out more
Yeah,
independent artists be discovered, because there's so much that they have to fight through to just get out there, and it's lucrative
yeah,
too. Some of these placement deals can be quite income improving for an independent artist, and it's a lot of fun. It's an amazing product, and I'm excited to be helping them on their journey, because it's going back to my roots, essentially of
I love it. I love it. It's so funny. When I can be a total nerd sometimes in college. I think I did in one of my communications classes. I was kind of tracking how like popular music usage in commercials seems to be really taking off. This was like in the late '90s to date me because I'm old.
so
Because
fascinating.
I was what got me into marketing was the draw of like how just storytelling, TV was the medium, internet was really nothing. I was, in high school it was like Netscape and Alta Vista and
Yeah.
stuff like that, for me. And so obviously it's evolved and it's much more immersive, blah, blah, blah. But TV was the thing. And so a TV show, a movie, a commercial was like what drew people in, what people paid attention to. And those commercial spots were kind of everything, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so that kind of drew me in of all the things I could work on and do. And so that got me into communication. Long story short, I thought that was fascinating. So the fact that you're working on that now, tapping into this explosion of like how do artists kind of weave into social, which is almost like inverted, almost like the new TV to many, is really interesting.
Yeah, it's been that's okay. We need to have a side conversation about what you learned from that study too, too, because it is really fascinating on how uh, artists are being discovered nowadays, either through advertising, or TV, or TV, or music, or video games. Um,
Yeah,
and it's just like they have to go through so much. There's so much noise out there, right? And also, you know, they have to do it themselves. Like they have to distribute themselves. They have to do everything.
yeah,
So if there could be a way to help folks,
yeah,
got to be the
yeah,
middleman. And it's
yeah.
also Encontio is AI powered too. So we have a little assistance back there, essentially helping connect the dots on projects, which is really cool. Like
Love.
I love showing people that, and they're like, "Oh, this is amazing." So
I'm super into it. Um, that's amazing. Yeah, I think wow, there's a lot to talk about there. Is there anything trend wise that you've maybe picked up that's shareable from the Encanto experience and maybe some of those learnings? Like, is there an artist that you're like, oh my gosh, they saw like this outsized gain from what you can share? Just curious to know. Or is there a medium that you were didn't realize was such a great one for distribution?
Yeah, so Encanto is pre-launch right now, so we haven't,
Okay.
you know, we don't really have that type of information just yet. But what I've seen a lot in the industry and the music industry itself is that a lot of artists, they rely on distribution channels like Spotify and a lot of the other streaming channels. But they keep on coming back to there's got to be a better way. There's got to be a better way for us to just get discovered and make a livable wage. Um, and I think the biggest trend is like, how do we do that? And
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
that I would say it shouldn't be a trend. It should be the way things are, right? Um,
Yeah.
and another thing outside of music discovery is going back to the influencers is super fans. Like, how do we find a band's core fans that will buy the merch, will buy the albums as soon as they come out or pre-order them, like will travel ridiculous distances for the band? Like, how do we find those folks for a certain artist? And there's a lot of companies out there working on that, trying to identify super fans. And again, that crosses over just to like
So
a
cool.
product or anything. Like, how do you find your core folks that again are like, or ride or die? They're gonna go travel to Argentina to go see Taylor Swift. you know?
Yeah. I know a few of those people.
Come on,
That's
you
amazing.
are you one? You're like, I've got my tickets right now.
No, no, I appreciate aspects of it for sure. But no. Um, so speaking of paying thousands of dollars for a concert ticket, what is a recent purchase that you made that you just rave about that you want to share with the audience?
Hmm. So I haven't spent thousands of dollars on concert tickets, but I may have spent a couple $1,000s on records. So I bought a record player. Well, it was gifted to me from my wonderful mother-in-law for Christmas. And I got this
That's
record
amazing.
player after many years of going, I love music, but I knew as soon as I started getting into music collecting that it was going to be a hobby. It was going to be a way of life.
Hmm. Hmm.
So it has really changed my life, coming out of, the pandemic and being more socially isolated. I
Yep.
needed a kind of a good way also to just get out there and have a mission. Right. So I've been doing a lot of traveling around to record stores, and
That's
uh,
amazing.
it's exciting, it's the thrill of the hunt too, just going out and
Yes.
seeing what you discover, and
Yes.
like the coolest people with the most interesting stories either in the
Yeah.
record stores or that work at the record stores.
Yeah.
um, I started an
Yeah.
Instagram around my record collecting, so I met
Ooh,
a lot of the vinyl collecting community through there, and just like it's been a
amazing.
whole thing. They have Record Store Day twice a year, or once a year for like the big Record Store Day, where everybody waits in line sometimes at like 2 in the morning. I don't do that. Um, but they wait in line at 2 in the morning to get their exclusives.
Love it.
It's
Love it.
it's a whole thing. It's a whole thing. So
Yes.
it's changed my life. It's actually got me out the door, um, to go collect music. And I love sitting there. I love sitting there with the physical media and looking at the
Yeah.
album artwork, sitting on the floor
Yeah.
listening to the music.
It's literally art. Yeah.
Yeah, it's more of an experience. I get to actually
Yeah.
read the liner notes, learn a bit of history about the album, listen to the whole album instead of just skipping tracks. It's it's much more of an experience than just clicking on things. So I
Yes, yes.
it's not good for my bank account, but I love it.
You know, it resonates so much. We've had some really awesome guests in various worlds, obviously heavy performance marketing, heavy in affiliate influencer marketing, but we've gone on total tangents talking about music on this pod, and it's obviously an interest and a passion for me in a different way. I also got into the record thing when I got to Austin during the pandemic and got my little record player and have my little
Aha.
record stack. And I'm not probably as immersed in it as you, but I really enjoy it. Like on weekends when it's like mellow time with the kids, I'll just like put it on and get some off the TV and get us doing something else. And
It's that's the thing. It's like it gets you
yeah,
up and moving. Like I just the energy in the place in the morning, it gets us up and moving. And I love seeing families or folks with their kids introduced like out to record stores with their kids, and the kids are like, "Oh, what's this?" Or like, "Hey, yeah," and then they're talking, they're conversing about the music, and it's just like, oh, you're introducing a whole new generation to um,
yeah,
physical media, right? So it's
yeah.
exciting. It's exciting.
It's coming back. I think there's a demand for live events, which is a whole another concept. We've done a lot in that world for our team and
Yeah.
different great technology ticketing platforms, and we love that space and enjoy it as well. And yeah, I'm so thrilled to hear you're in that and diving in and doing it. And had some awesome experiences since we last chatted, and in marketing and in life. That's what this is all about. Um, I couldn't be more grateful to see you and hang and chat and excited to do it again. Where can folks, find you that want to learn more about what you're working on and connect with you?
Yeah. So I can be found at my website, amberosborne.com. If you just want to like check out the just general stuff. And then Instagram at Amber Osborne, and Osborne's with a zero instead of an O. And then my Instagram for my record collecting is moving in stereo with underscores in between each. So it's moving underscore in underscore stereo. And then I could be found on
Love it.
LinkedIn as well, in various other channels that I probably forgot to update. like,
Yeah, ditto there.
yeah,
Amber, you rock literally and figuratively. It's
thank
been
you.
a pleasure. I love chatting with you and have an awesome rest of your day.
Yeah, you too. Thank you.